Papa, they're already inside.
The last thing President Ouattara Alassane heard before the palace lights went out forever was the sound of his own daughter's voice on the encrypted phone, whispering 4 words that would unravel 3 governments. The line went dead as Abidjan plunged into darkness. President Ouattara dropped the phone, his hands trembling as the emergency generators failed to kick in. Through his office window, he could see military vehicles surrounding the presidential palace, their headlights cutting through the humid West African night like searchlights hunting prey. The rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors grew louder overhead, their downdraft rustling the palm trees that had witnessed decades of Ivorian political upheaval. At 78, Ouattara had survived more political crises than most leaders could imagine. He had weathered the post-election violence of 2010, navigated the complexities of French-African relations, and transformed Ivory Coast into one of West Africa's most stable democracies. But this felt different, more calculated, more final. Mr. President, his chief of security, Captain Yves Cohn, burst through the mahogany doors. "We need to move you to the safe room immediately. Colonel Kouassi has taken control of the radio stations and airport." Ouattara's blood ran cold. Mamadou Kouassi had been like a son to him, a brilliant young officer he'd personally promoted 3 times in 5 years. The colonel had graduated top of his class from the military academy in Bingerville, completed advanced training in France, and had shown unwavering loyalty during the Islamist insurgency in the north. Kouassi? That's impossible. He was at my daughter's wedding last month. His own daughter calls me grandfather. "Sir, with respect, we don't have time for disbelief." Cohn grabbed the president's arm. "The palace is surrounded. We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach the main entrance." As if summoned by his words, the sound of splintering wood echoed from the palace's ground floor. Boots thundered up marble staircases that had once hosted Nelson Mandela, Jacques Chirac, and Barack Obama. The symbols of Ivory Coast's hard-won democracy were being trampled by soldiers who had sworn to protect them. Ouattara's mind raced to his daughter's warning. Amina was supposed to be in Paris, finishing her PhD in international relations at the Sorbonne. How did she know about the coup before he did? And what did she mean by "they're already inside"? His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown number. "Your daughter is safe. For now. Cooperate, and she stays that way. The old man taught you well, but this is a new game, a friend." The reference to the old man made Ouattara's heart stop. Only a handful of people knew about his private conversations with Félix Houphouët-Boigny, Ivory Coast's founding father, before the elder statesman's death. Someone with access to the highest levels of government intelligence was pulling the strings. The blood drained from Ouattara's face. This wasn't just a military coup, it was a kidnapping, a hostage situation wrapped in the flag of political revolution. Captain Cohn noticed his expression. "Sir, what is it?" Before Ouattara could answer, the office doors exploded inward. Colonel Mamadou Kouassi strode in, flanked by 6 soldiers in full combat gear. At 34, Kouassi cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with intelligent eyes that had once looked at Ouattara with respect and admiration. Now they held something else entirely, regret mixed with grim determination. "Mr. President," Kouassi said, his voice steady but lacking its usual warmth. "I'm sorry it had to come to this." "Mamadou, what are you doing? We're like family. Your mother worked in my campaign when I first ran for parliament." Kouassi flinched almost imperceptibly, his jaw tightening. Family doesn't sell their country to the highest bidder. Family doesn't give mining contracts to foreign companies while their people starve in villages without electricity or clean water. Those contracts brought jobs, brought development, $2 billion in foreign investment last year alone. They brought change. Kouassi's composure cracked for a moment, revealing the passion beneath his military bearing. Chinese lithium mines in the north displacing whole communities, American oil platforms off the coast where our fishermen can't work, French uranium extraction in the west poisoning groundwater. What's left for Ivorians except the scraps from foreign tables? Ouattara studied his former protege's face. The passion was real, but something else lurked beneath fear, perhaps, or resignation. The colonel's eyes kept darting to his men, as if he wasn't entirely sure of their loyalty either. "Who's pulling your strings, Mamado? This isn't you talking. You wrote your master's thesis on sustainable development partnerships. You believed in engagement with the international community." Kouassi's jaw tightened further. He gestured to his soldiers, who moved to escort Ouattara out. "The Transitional Military Council will ensure a smooth transfer of power. You will be treated with dignity if you cooperate." "And if I don't cooperate, what happens to Amina?" he asked. The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Kouassi's silence was answer enough. As they marched him through corridors lined with portraits of previous presidents, Ouattara caught glimpses of the outside world through shattered windows. Abidjan was burning in places, not the chaotic destruction of popular uprising, but the controlled fires of strategic targets. The central bank, the telecommunications ministry, the French cultural center. This coup had been planned with military precision and international scope. Outside, he could hear chanting in multiple languages: French, English, Arabic, and local dialects. But something was wrong with the rhythm. Real protest chants evolved organically, building and fading with crowd emotion. These sounded rehearsed, orchestrated. Even the revolution was being staged. As they reached the palace's main entrance, Ouattara saw something that chilled him more than the weapons pointed in his direction. Journalists. Not local reporters who might ask uncomfortable questions, but international correspondents with expensive equipment and press credentials from major networks. They had been positioned to capture his voluntary transfer of power, to broadcast his apparent acquiescence to the world. This wasn't just a coup, it was theater performed for a global audience that would see what the directors wanted them to see. Chapter 2. The Puppet Master's Web. 3,000 miles away, in a glass-walled conference room, overlooking the Potomac River, Marcus Steele watched the first BC reports of the Ivory Coast coup with satisfaction. The former Delta Force operator turned private military contractor had orchestrated more regime changes than most people had vacation destinations. But this one felt different, more personal, more complete. At 53, Steele cut an imposing figure even in his tailored business suit. His gray hair was cropped military short. His posture remained parade ground straight, and his cold blue eyes had seen too much of war to be disturbed by political theater. The conference room walls were lined with photographs from his military career: Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya. Each picture represented a chapter in America's global war on terror, and each had taught him lessons about power, loyalty, and the price of idealism. "Right on schedule," he murmured into his secure phone. "How's our boy Kouassi holding up?" The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the charismatic young leader who had taken control of Burkina Faso 2 years earlier. At 29, Traoré had become something of a folk hero across West Africa, the social media savvy soldier who promised to liberate the Sahel from foreign exploitation. His Twitter account had over 2 million followers. His speeches were remixed into viral TikTok videos, and his image appeared on t-shirts from Dakar to Lagos. "He's nervous," Traoré admitted, his French-accented English betraying none of the confidence his public persona projected. "The president's daughter, we weren't supposed to involve civilians. This crosses lines that make my commanders uncomfortable." Steele's reflection in the window showed a man who had long ago stopped worrying about lines. Amina Ouattara inserted herself into this operation when she started asking questions about lithium mining rights. "My sources at the Sorbonne say she was writing her dissertation on foreign resource extraction and democratic backsliding in West Africa. We couldn't let that research see daylight. She's a student, not a threat. Her thesis advisor says she's brilliant but naive about realpolitik. She's the daughter of a president with access to classified documents and international contacts. Her thesis advisor is Dr. Marie Dubois, former French intelligence analyst turned academic. Nothing naive about that connection." Steele pulled up a holographic display showing Amina's research network. In my business, anyone with that kind of access and intelligence is either a strategic asset or a liability. We chose asset. Traore was quiet for a moment. Steele could hear crowd noise in the background, probably another rally celebrating Burkina Faso's independence from French influence. The irony wasn't lost on either of them that Traore's revolution was being bankrolled by American interests. What about the international response? The African Union is already calling emergency sessions. The AU is toothless without Western backing, and the West is divided. France is tired of propping up African governments that can't control their own security situations. Germany wants stable energy partnerships. The US needs lithium for the green transition. Steele's assistant knocked and entered, sliding a tablet across the mahogany table. The screen showed real-time social media analytics. Ivory Coast Coup was trending worldwide, but the narrative was being carefully shaped by bot networks and sponsored content. The information campaign is working, Steele continued. Twitter is full of citizen journalists praising Kouassi as a liberator fighting neocolonialism. Instagram influencers are posting about African sovereignty and ending resource exploitation. By morning, half the world will see this as a popular revolution, not a coup. The social media operation was Steele's masterpiece. 3 years in development, it had created an entire ecosystem of authentic, seeming African voices calling for radical change. The influencers didn't know they were being paid by American companies. The money was laundered through NGOs, cultural organizations, and cryptocurrency donations that appeared to come from diaspora communities. And the American president? Your former boss won't interfere? Steele chuckled. Trump's busy with his own problems, legal battles, campaign rallies, truth social drama. Besides, he understands business better than any president in decades. Once we control the lithium deposits, American battery manufacturers will thank us. Electric vehicles need lithium, and China currently controls 70% of the global supply through their Belt and Road projects. This levels the playing field. The battery tech industry's contract was worth $50 billion over 10 years. More importantly, it would give American companies priority access to lithium supplies at a time when every major automaker was racing to electrify their flights. Tesla, Ford, General Motors, they all needed guaranteed lithium supplies to meet their 2030 targets. What about the French? They have defense treaties with Ouattara dating back to independence. The French are tired of their African obligations. Macron's been looking for an excuse to reduce military commitments in the Sahel ever since the Mali debacle. We're giving him one. As for the mining contracts, Steele pulled up a holographic display showing mineral deposits across West Africa. The lithium belt stretched from Guinea through Mali and Burkina Faso into northern Ivory Coast, one of the largest untapped reserves on Earth. Battery Tech Industries has already prepared the paperwork. Once Kouassi signs, we'll have exclusive rights to the largest untapped lithium reserve on the continent. Chinese companies will have to negotiate with us instead of corrupt local officials. The irony wasn't lost on Steele. He was using African nationalism to serve American corporate interests, just as his predecessors had used anti-communism during the Cold War. The methods evolved: social media instead of radio broadcasts, private contractors instead of CIA operatives, but the objectives remained the same: secure strategic resources, maintain favorable governments, and keep competitors at bay. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Abidjan: package secured, old man cooperating, awaiting phase 2 authorization. Your man has Ouattara, Steele told Traore. Phase 2 begins now. How quickly can you move your peacekeeping forces across the border? 6 hours. But Marcus, if this goes wrong, if the international community intervenes? It won't go wrong. I've been doing this since before you were born. Gulf War, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, I've seen every kind of intervention fail and succeed. Trust the process. Steele's confidence wasn't misplaced. He had studied every successful and failed coup attempt of the past 30 years. The key was controlling the narrative in the first 72 hours while creating facts on the ground that made reversal politically impossible. Once Traoré's forces crossed into Ivory Coast as peacekeepers supporting the new government, the international community would face a choice: military intervention to restore an illegitimate leader, or acceptance of a popular government that promised stability and favorable business terms. After ending the call, Steele walked to his window and gazed out at Washington, D.C. The Capitol's monuments gleamed in the morning sun: the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the Capitol dome, symbols of democracy and freedom that had inspired liberation movements worldwide. He wondered what the Founding Fathers would think of their republic's evolution into a global empire sustained by shadow operations and corporate interests. His phone rang again. This time it was his handler at Battery Tech Industries, CEO Jennifer Morrison. "Steele, I'm watching CNN. Tell me the circus in Africa is going according to plan." Morrison was a former Pentagon acquisition officer who understood the intersection of national security and corporate interests better than most. Under her leadership, Battery Tech had become America's largest lithium processing company, with contracts spanning from Argentina to Australia. "Better than planned. We'll have our lithium contracts within a week. China will be scrambling to match our prices within a month. The stockholders are nervous about the optics. Military coups aren't great for AS ratings. The optics will improve once Kouassi starts talking about environmental protection and sustainable development. We've prepared speeches about responsible mining practices and community benefit sharing. By the time he's done, this will look like a green revolution." "And the girl, the president's daughter." Steele's expression hardened. "She's leverage, nothing more, nothing less." But even as he said it, Steele felt an unfamiliar twinge of doubt. Amina Ouattara was 26 years old, brilliant, and innocent of the great game being played around her. Her doctoral research was genuinely motivated by concern for African development, not corporate espionage or political manipulation. Using her as a pawn violated every principle he'd once sworn to uphold as a soldier. The line between patriot and mercenary had blurred somewhere between Iraq and Afghanistan, between defending democracy and serving corporate interests. Each operation had required smaller compromises until compromise became the operating principle. Now, staring at his reflection in the window, Steele wondered if he could still tell the difference between national interest and personal profit. His secure computer chimed with an incoming video call from Abidjan. Colonel Kouassi appeared on screen, his uniform crisp but his face showing strain. "Steele, we have a problem. Some of my officers are asking questions about American involvement. Word is spreading that foreign contractors are directing operations. Handle it. That's what you're paid for." "It's not that simple. These men have served with me for years. They joined this operation because they believed in changing Ivory Coast, not because they wanted to serve foreign interests." Steele leaned forward, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used to command soldiers in combat. "Colonel, let me be very clear. You have two choices: complete this operation successfully and become the leader who liberated Ivory Coast from neo-colonial exploitation, or fail and spend the rest of your life in prison for treason. There is no middle ground. And if I succeed, what guarantee do I have that you won't discard me when the contracts are signed? You have my word." Kouassi's laugh was bitter. The word of a mercenary. How reassuring. The word of a professional who has never broken a contract. "I'm not asking you to trust me, Colonel. I'm asking you to trust your own ambitions. You want to transform Ivory Coast? You need capital, technology, international recognition. I'm offering all three." After ending the call, Steele poured himself a glass of bourbon Maker's Mark, a Kentucky brand that reminded him of simpler times when the enemy wore uniforms and the mission objectives were clear. Outside his window, the Potomac River flowed steadily toward the Chesapeake Bay, carrying the runoff from a capital city built on compromise and ambition. His reflection in the darkening glass looked like a stranger, older, harder, more calculating than the young paratrooper who had once believed in fighting for democracy and human rights. But the world had changed, and survival required adaptation. In the new great game between American capitalism and Chinese authoritarianism, idealism was a luxury that democratic societies could no longer afford. Or so he told himself as he drained the bourbon and prepared for the next phase of Operation Sahel Unity. Chapter 3. The Captain's Gambit. In a secure compound outside Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré paced his war room like a caged lion. Maps of West Africa covered every wall, marked with colored pins representing military bases, mining sites, and political targets. Red pins showed confirmed Chinese investments, blue pins marked French military positions, and green pins indicated resources under American influence. The pattern revealed the true scope of foreign competition for African wealth. The young captain who had captivated millions with his anti-colonial rhetoric now found himself trapped in a web of international intrigue more complex than any he had imagined. His rise to power had been meteoric, from unknown military academy graduate to continental icon in less than 2 years. But meteoric rises often ended in meteoric falls. His aide, Lieutenant Fatima Sankara, entered with the latest intelligence reports. At 28, Sankara was one of the few women in Burkina Faso's military leadership, and her sharp analytical mind had made her indispensable to Traoré's inner circle. She was also one of the few people who knew the full scope of Operation Sahel Unity, the grand plan to unite military governments across West Africa under a shared ideology of economic independence. What she didn't know was how much that plan had been compromised by American interests. Captain, the African Union is calling an emergency session for tomorrow. Nigeria and Ghana are mobilizing diplomatic pressure. President Tinubu is threatening sanctions if we don't withdraw support for the Ivory Coast operation. Traoré studied her face, looking for signs that she suspected his growing doubts about their American alliance. Sankara had joined his movement because she believed in genuine African liberation, not corporate-sponsored regime change. "What about social media sentiment?" he asked. "Mixed. Your core supporters are celebrating Ivory Coast as another victory against neocolonialism. The hashtag Sahel Unity is trending across Francophone Africa, but there's growing skepticism about foreign involvement. Some users are connecting dots between the coup timing and lithium discoveries." Sankara handed him a tablet showing Twitter analytics. The bot network Steele had deployed were working, but authentic African voices were beginning to question the narrative. Investigative journalists in Lagos, Accra, and Dakar were digging into the financial networks behind the social media campaigns. "There's something else," Sankara continued. "Intelligence suggests that President Ouattara's daughter has been researching foreign resource extraction. Her academic advisor has connections to French intelligence." Traoré cursed under his breath. He had genuinely believed he could use American resources to achieve African liberation. Steele had presented himself as a pragmatic ally, someone who understood that African stability served American interests better than the chaos of Chinese economic colonialism or continued French paternalism. But as the operation unfolded, Traoré realized he was the one being used. "Lieutenant, what do you know about battery tech industries?" Sankara's expression sharpened. "American Lithium Processing Company, major Pentagon contractor. Why do you ask?" "Research them, quietly. Report directly to me." His secure phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted number. "Your American friend is not your friend. The girl has information that could expose everything. Meet me at the old university. Come alone. Someone who actually wants African liberation." Traoré stared at the message. His first instinct was to ignore it. Operational security demanded avoiding unknown contacts. But something about the phrasing resonated. Someone who actually wants African liberation implied the sender knew about his doubts regarding Steele's true motivations. "Lieutenant, I need you to monitor communications with Abidjan. Any sign of wavering from Kouassi's forces, contact me immediately." "Sir, where are you going?" "To meet a ghost." Traore drove through Ouagadougou's dusty streets in an unmarked Toyota Hilux, his sidearm loaded and his phone tracking disabled. The capital city bore the scars of decades of political instability: bullet holes in buildings, abandoned construction projects, infrastructure that functioned despite chronic underfunding. It was exactly the kind of African city that foreign investors either ignored or exploited, never developed. The old university had been abandoned since the previous coup, its lecture halls now home to squatters and stray dogs. Weeds grew through cracks in the concrete, and graffiti covered walls that had once displayed portraits of revolutionary heroes. As he approached the designated meeting point, the former philosophy department, he spotted a figure in the shadows. Dr. Fatou Diallo stepped into the moonlight, her presence both surprising and somehow inevitable. The prominent democracy activist had been a thorn in his side since he took power, organizing protests and international pressure campaigns. But her reputation for integrity was unquestioned, even by her enemies. At 45, Dr. Diallo carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades fighting for principles rather than power. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her clothes were practical rather than fashionable, the uniform of an academic who cared more about ideas than appearance. Dr. Diallo, I should arrest you for violating curfew. Captain Traore, I should report you for treason against Africa. They faced each other across the abandoned courtyard, two visions of African leadership in stark opposition. Traore represented the military efficiency that promised quick results. Diallo embodied the slow, messy process of democratic accountability. How did you know about the American involvement? Traore asked. Diallo smiled grimly. Did you think you were the only one with international contacts? I have friends at the Sorbonne who've been tracking research into West African resource extraction. Amina Ouattara's dissertation advisor contacted me when she disappeared. She's not missing. She's safe. She's a hostage. And her research could expose the entire network of foreign manipulation across the Sahel. That's why they took her, and that's why you need to help me get her back. Diallo pulled out a secure tablet, its screen showing a complex web of financial transactions, corporate structures, and political connections. The data painted a picture of systematic foreign interference spanning multiple countries and years. This is just the beginning, she said. Shell companies, lithium rights, private military contractors, it's all connected. Your revolution, my friend, is being funded by the very neo-colonial forces you claim to oppose. Traore felt the weight of his choices pressing down like the humid night air. What do you know about her research? Everything. Diallo swiped through pages of academic papers, mining contracts and financial transfers. Battery Tech Industries, Steele's primary client, has been acquiring mineral rights across the Sahel through a complex network of subsidiaries and local partners. Each military coup creates opportunities for renegotiating contracts on more favorable terms. The evidence was damning. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Identify strategic resources, destabilize existing governments through various means, install friendly regimes, secure extraction rights. It was neocolonialism with a Silicon Valley business model. Steele told me we were building African economic independence. He said American partnerships were better than Chinese debt traps or French paternalism. Steele told you what you wanted to hear. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? Traore's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Lieutenant Sankara. Kouassi is requesting immediate reinforcement. Civilians are protesting outside the palace. Situation deteriorating rapidly. He looked at Diallo, seeing his own reflection in her determined eyes. Two paths diverged before him: continue down the road of compromise and foreign dependence, or risk everything for the principles that had originally motivated his revolution. If I help you rescue Amina Ouattara, I'll be betraying my alliance with Steele. My government could fall. The Americans could cut off funding and support. If you don't help me, you'll be betraying Africa. Your government will become a puppet state with you as the puppet. How long do you think Steele will keep you in power once the contracts are signed? The choice crystallized in that moment. Traore had entered military service to serve his people, not foreign corporations. But extricating himself from Steele's web would require careful planning and considerable courage. What do you propose? Diallo's smile was fierce. We exposed the entire operation. Amina's research combined with insider testimony could trigger investigations in 3 capitals. Congressional hearings in Washington, parliamentary inquiries in Paris, AU sanctions, the whole network could collapse. And then what? Chinese companies move in to fill the vacuum. At least the Americans pay better than Beijing. Then we build something different. Economic partnerships based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Resource extraction that actually develops local communities. Foreign investment that transfers technology instead of just extracting wealth. Traore studied the data on her tablet, seeing the scope of manipulation that had shaped his own rise to power. Social media campaigns, financial incentives, weapons supplies, everything had been orchestrated to create the appearance of authentic African liberation while serving foreign corporate interests. This will destroy me politically. My supporters will see it as betrayal. Your supporters will see it as evolution. From revolutionary to statesman, from puppet to patriot. A new message appeared on Traore's phone. This one from Steele, status report required. Phase 3 authorization pending your confirmation. Phase 3. Traore knew what that meant: the permanent consolidation of American control over West African lithium supplies. Once that phase began, there would be no turning back. Dr. Diallo, if we do this, if we expose the network, we need to be prepared for consequences. Steele isn't just a contractor. He has connections throughout the American defense establishment. This could trigger a broader confrontation. Then we better make sure we have the truth on our side. Traore made his decision. He deleted Steele's message without responding and turned off his secure phone. Tell me about your plan to get Amina out of Abidjan. Chapter 4. The Unraveling. In a safe house overlooking Abidjan's lagoon, Amina Ouattara sat bound to a chair, her laptop open before her. The irony was bitter. Her captors wanted her to complete the very research that had gotten her kidnapped in the first place. Her doctoral dissertation on foreign resource extraction in West Africa had been theoretical until 12 hours ago. Now she was living proof of her own thesis, that democracy in the region was being systematically undermined by external actors pursuing strategic resources. The safe house was a study in contradictions. Expensive furniture mixed with military equipment, fine art hung next to tactical maps, and classical music played softly while armed guards maintained watch shifts. It felt more like a corporate retreat than a kidnapping site, which somehow made it more disturbing. Her guard, Corporal Bamba, kept glancing at his phone. Something was making him anxious. At 23, Bamba seemed too young for this kind of operation, more like a university student than a coup conspirator. His nervous energy suggested he was having second thoughts about his role in recent events. "Corporal," she said in French, "you know this is wrong, don't you?" Bamba looked up, his eyes betraying inner conflict. "Orders are orders, mademoiselle." "Whose orders? Colonel Kouassi's? Or someone else's?" "I don't ask questions above my pay grade." "Maybe you should. Maybe we all should." Amina had spent the past 6 hours reviewing her research under armed guard, and the pattern was becoming clearer. The coup timing wasn't coincidental, it was precisely calculated to occur just as her dissertation was scheduled for defense. Someone had been monitoring her academic progress and saw her research as a threat significant enough to justify regime change. Her laptop showed financial flows that connected American defense contractors to mining companies to social media operations to military suppliers across West Africa. The network was vast, sophisticated, and coordinated at the highest levels. But it also had vulnerabilities, too many moving parts. Too many people who didn't fully understand their role in the larger operation. Before Bamba could respond to her questions, the door burst open. Colonel Kouassi himself entered, his uniform disheveled and his face grim. Behind him came 3 soldiers Amina didn't recognize, foreign mercenaries, judging by their equipment and bearing. Their gear was too advanced, too uniform, too expensive for any African military. Miss Awatara, Kouassi said, I apologize for the circumstances, but your research threatens to destabilize the entire region. My research exposes how the region is already being destabilized. Steele's voice came from the doorway. Your research is naive idealism that ignores economic realities. The American contractor entered with casual confidence, but Amina could see stress lines around his eyes. Something wasn't going according to his plan. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usual composure showing cracks. Mr. Steele, I presume, my research includes an entire chapter on Blackwater, West Africa. Fascinating how your company secured contracts in 3 countries just weeks before military coups occurred. Steele's smile was cold. Correlation isn't causation, Miss Awatara, though I suppose they don't teach practical geopolitics at the Sorbonne. They teach ethics, something you might want to look into. Ethics are a luxury for people who don't have to make hard choices about global security and economic stability. Kouassi stepped between them, his discomfort evident. Enough. Steele, the situation is deteriorating. Civilian protests are spreading, and my own officers are questioning orders. Some are asking why we're taking direction from foreigners. Your officers are taking direction from you, Colonel, and you're taking direction from the legitimate transitional authority. What legitimate authority? The voice came from the shadows near the window. Ibrahim Traore stepped into the light, flanked by Dr. Fatou Diallo and 2 Burkinabe soldiers. His presence shifted the entire dynamic of the room. The young captain who had become the face of African liberation stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, his military bearing radiating controlled fury. Steele's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Traore was faster. I wouldn't, Marcus. My men have this building surrounded. Captain, what are you doing? Kouassi demanded. We have an agreement. Operation Sahel Unity. We had an agreement based on lies. Traore's voice carried the authority that had made him a continental icon. Dr. Diallo showed me the real contracts, the real money flows. We're not liberating Africa, we're auctioning it off to the highest bidder. Steele's composure finally cracked. You idealistic fool. You think you can run a country on revolutionary slogans and Twitter followers. You need capital, technology markets. I was offering you partnership in the new global economy. You were offering us slavery with better marketing. Dr. Diallo stepped forward, her tablet displaying the financial networks they had uncovered. Colonel Kouassi, you still have a choice. History will remember you either as a patriot who recognized his mistake, or as a traitor who sold his country for foreign promises. The confrontation was interrupted by Corporal Bamba's phone ringing. He answered nervously, his face growing pale as he listened. Colonel, he said to Kouassi, it's Lieutenant Colonel Diabate. The 2nd Battalion is refusing orders. They're demanding to know why we're following American instructions instead of serving Ivory Coast. Kouassi closed his eyes. The coup was crumbling from within, eaten away by the very contradictions that Traore had finally recognized. Military officers who had joined the operation to serve their country were learning they were serving foreign corporations instead. There's more, Bamba continued. Social media is exploding with leaked documents about lithium contracts. Someone is releasing classified information about American mining rights. Amina smiled grimly. That would be my research. I uploaded everything to multiple cloud servers before you kidnapped me. Scheduled releases triggered when I failed to check in. Steele's face went white. You little. Careful, Mr. Steele. Dr. Diallo is recording everything on that tablet. Your confession of foreign interference in African politics would make excellent evidence for the International Criminal Court. The young colonel looked around the room at Steele's barely contained fury, at Traore's disappointed expression, at Amina's defiant gaze, at Dr. Diallo's steady documentation of everything occurring. The weight of his nation's future pressed down on his shoulders. Corporal Bamba, he said finally, release Miss Awatara. Sir. You heard me. Cut her bonds. Steele drew his weapon. I don't think so, Colonel. Too much money is at stake here. Battery Tech has $50 billion invested in this operation. But he was outnumbered and outgunned. Traor's soldiers had their weapons trained on him, and even Kouassi's men seemed uncertain about following American orders at gunpoint. "It's over, Steele," Traor said. "Your little empire of puppets is finished." Steele's smile returned, but it was the grin of a cornered predator. "You think this is over? I've got contractors in 8 African countries, mining operations on 3 continents, and enough political connections in Washington to bury this entire affair. You're not liberating Africa, you're just changing the terms of its exploitation." "Maybe," Traor admitted, "but at least they'll be our terms negotiated by our representatives for our benefit." But even as he said it, Steele felt an unfamiliar twinge of doubt. Amina Ouattara was 26 years old, brilliant and stubborn traits that reminded him uncomfortably of his own daughter, now estranged. He shook off the sentiment. In his world, empathy was a liability. Amina sat in a dimly lit room, wrists bound but posture defiant. The guards outside her door spoke in hurried whispers French, English, and the clipped tones of military radio codes. She'd pieced together enough to know her father was alive, but a prisoner. The coup was bloodless, at least for now, but she sensed the violence simmering beneath the surface. Her mind raced. She remembered the encrypted message she'd sent before they took her phone. "Trust no one. Lithium is the key." If her thesis advisor had received it, perhaps someone in Paris or New York would realize the true stakes. But was it enough? The door opened. Colonel Kouassi entered, his uniform immaculate, his face drawn. He studied her for a moment, then sat across from her. "You're safe, Amina," he said quietly. "For now. But I need your cooperation. Your research, where are your files?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "Why? So your new American friends can bury the truth." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand. I'm trying to protect our country. Foreign companies have bled us dry. This is our chance to take back control." Amina laughed bitterly. "By selling us to new masters, you're being used, Colonel? They'll promise you the world, then leave us with poisoned rivers and empty promises." Kouassi hesitated. For a moment the mask slipped, and she saw the young officer who had once played chess with her at state dinners. "If you help me," he said, "I can ensure your father's safety. Refuse and I can't guarantee anything." Outside, the city convulsed with uncertainty. International news outlets broadcast images of jubilation in the streets, while in the shadows resistance simmered. Loyalists to Ouattara, student activists, and miners displaced by foreign contracts began to organize. Social media, so carefully manipulated by Steele's team, now became a double-edged sword as rumors of Amina's kidnapping and the true motives behind the coup began to leak. Back in Washington, Steele received an urgent message: local resistance growing, narrative slipping. He cursed under his breath. He'd underestimated Amina's network and the power of a single, well-timed leak. Jennifer Morrison called again, her voice sharp. "Contain this. If the world learns we're behind this, the deal is dead." Steele nodded grimly. "I'll handle it." But as he looked at the swirling chaos on his screens, he realized the game had changed. In Abidjan, in Paris, in Washington, the lines between puppet and master were blurring. And in a world where truth could be weaponized as easily as a drone strike, even the best-laid conspiracies could unravel with a single spark. Amina, chained but unbroken, whispered to herself, "Papa, hold on. The world is watching." And for the first time, Marcus Steele wondered if he had finally met his match. Absolutely. Here's a compelling closing and call to action for the Abidjan conspiracy, following the story continuation above. As the sun set over Abidjan, the city's skyline flickered with both hope and uncertainty. In her dim cell, Amina pressed her forehead to the cool concrete, drawing strength from the distant sounds of resistance echoing through the streets. She knew the world was watching now. The truth she risked everything to reveal was out, and the forces that once operated in the shadows were exposed to the harsh light of global scrutiny. Across oceans, Marcus Steele stared at his reflection in the glass, haunted by the realization that power, once unleashed, could not always be controlled. The conspiracy he had engineered was unraveling, thread by thread, in ways he never anticipated. In the coming days, the fate of a nation and the future of its people would be decided not just by soldiers or politicians, but by the courage of those willing to speak out, to resist, and to demand justice. Will Amina's message spark the change her country desperately needs? Will Steele's empire of secrets collapse under the weight of truth? The answers lie not just within the corridors of power, but in the hearts of ordinary Ivorians and in the hands of readers like you. Will you stand by as history is rewritten, or will you raise your voice for truth and justice? Share Amina's story. Discuss it. Demand transparency from those who profit in the secret, because sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with gunfire, but with a single courageous act and the people who refuse to look away. If you're not following us yet, don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now. Turn on your notification bell to be the first to know when Amina's story is posted.